Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCullum, and I'm here today at the VHU, the Military History Institute in Prague in the Czech Republic, and we're taking a look at some really funky Czech early machine guns like this Netsch. Now, there is no model designation to this, it's just the machine gun that he made, and it's actually a gun with a very specific designation, a type of machine gun that the Czech military was experimenting with in the early 1920s, never actually adopted and gave up, but it's a cool name. It is the samostřil, which translates directly as self-shooter. And it was intended to be a category of weapon in between a rifle and a machine gun. This is in fact almost exactly in line with how in English we used to refer to automatic rifles. The best example of this being the BAR, which was not intended to be a light machine gun. Remember, the BAR was originally adopted without a bipod of any kind. It was meant for like walking fire from the hip. And there traditionally are like three guns that fall into this automatic rifle category: the BAR, the French Chauchat, and the Russian Federov, automat Fedorov. And this is essentially the exact same concept. It's bigger than a shoulder rifle, but it's not meant to be a light machine gun. It's a samostřil. Anyway, this particular one was designed by a guy named Josef Netsch. He was Slovakian, and he had some experience in engineering and manufacturing from working at Škoda during the First World War. Well, after the First World War, Czechoslovakia becomes its own independent country in 1919. The Czechoslovak government and military are looking for armaments, and Netsch is one of the independent inventors who's designing some guns. Now, his first gun was a submachine gun in 9mm Steyr. They actually have some of those here at the VHU collection, but we'll cover that in a separate video. And it didn't go anywhere. His second gun was this, or was the first version of this. So in December of 1921, he presented his first rifle to the Czech military for consideration. It was semi-automatic only, fed from a 10-round drum magazine. When he presented it, they did some shooting testing with it. It fired 300 rounds, had a few issues, but seemed promising, but they wanted a select fire one. So he came back just a couple months later in February of 1922 with a select fire model. Now it had 10 and 20 round drums. It also seemed like it had some potential, and so the Czech military ordered 25 from him, and there was a significant test, a real test, done in March of 1923, where they were looking to actually adopt a samostřil for the Czech military, and the three major competitors at this test were Netsch, Hotchkiss, and Krnka. Hotchkiss, of course, being a French company, Krnka being another ex-Austro-Hungarian designer who has all sorts of funky designs. I've got a bunch of videos on some weird Krnka guns, but that's neither here nor there. Now, mechanically, Netsch's gun here is really quite unusual, and it's the operating system that's unusual. The locking system is just a rotating bolt, not a big deal. The operating system is a gas trap one, which means the barrel comes out to about here, inside this covered shroud, which is itself inside this shroud. So you've got three layers to this gun. When it fires, muzzle blast is captured in the very end section of the barrel, and it causes the barrel and its shroud, or it causes the shroud, the barrel is fixed. The shroud moves forward, and it actually moves forward rather substantially, like that. Then, when it returns rearward, under spring pressure, it cycles the bolt backwards until it goes all the way to the rear. It releases the bolt, picks up a new round, and runs it forward. So it looks like it's a long recoil gun, but it's actually a very odd forward operating gas trap system. So let's take a closer look. Let's dive into it. We'll pull the shrouds and the inner shrouds off and show you how this thing actually works. All right, are you ready for this? Let's dive right in. So first off, controls. We have a safety back here. You push this forward, and prevents the bolt from moving. It blocks the opening in the receiver. Netsch was had been around in World War I, and apparently knew a thing or two about mud in guns, and so he has a safety that completely blocks that opening. There is a selector switch here on the left side. Rearward is semi-auto, forward is full auto. Pretty basic stuff there. This is our magazine release lever. I push that in, and I can drop the drum magazine out. This holds 20 rounds. Let's see, there's a curved track inside there. You can unscrew it and take it apart, but it's loaded from the top 1 round at a time. And there is a ratcheting system right here. So you would put in cartridges and wind it up. And then when it is in the gun, this, let's see, there you go, you can see it right there. That little catch is depressed in, which releases the spring and lets the drum feed rounds in. In order to load it, we hook it in from the back like that, and then snap it forward. And it's actually a reasonably solid fit there, which is nice. Now, when the magazine's not in the gun, we can lift up this little catch. We can pull the handguard all the way back, cover up the magazine opening. Again, this guy knew a thing or two about combat in muddy conditions, I suspect. We have what looks to me like a very much Mosin-Nagant-inspired rear sight on here. No graduations on it for range. This hadn't gotten to that stage of development. And at the front, we have a barleycorn-style front sight on top of the barrel shroud. The only marking on the gun is this one, Czechoslovakia Zbrojovka. This AS, Achspol, that basically means company. It's the equivalent of INC in English or GmbH in German. And the company was formerly out of Prague. The actual factory was in Strakonica. All right, now the fun part, disassembly. We're going to start by taking out the 4 locking screws that hold the shroud in place. That one. And then we have 2 up here at the front, 1 on each side. Then we can pull this whole barrel shroud off. There we go. All right, let's put this down here. So here's our barrel shroud. It's just a sheet metal cover that goes over the whole gun. Has no actual effect on the operation of the gun. In theory, if you could keep all of your various bodily parts away from the moving bits, you could shoot this just fine without the shroud on it. Now, with that off, I think we can get a much better view of what's actually happening. Let me start by showing you the bolt up close. As with most like weird forward operating sort of guns, I can bypass the action by using the charging handle and just pull this back, and you can see we have a rotating bolt there. It is hammer fired. When it's all the way forward, rotates. There are rear locking lugs. You'll see those in a minute. When this is actually operating, what's going to happen is the shroud is going to go forward. So you can see this hook sticking up. This is going to come all the way forward until it hooks onto this, like that. Then the giant spring around the barrel up here is going to push this whole shroud backward, and it's now hooked onto the operating bars. You can see that we're pushing the bolt open, and when it comes all the way back, this block is going to push this back down and release it, thus locking the bolt in place and pushing this forward again. So once again, this goes forward, the operating bars hook at the top, then it returns, the bolt's going to open until at the very end of travel back here, it disconnects and the bolt's going to slam forward. Just like that. So it's not quite, it's a very mechanically funky system here, but the concept is not that difficult to understand, I don't think. Now, let's go one step further in disassembly and take out this operating mechanism. To do that, we need to unscrew the rear cap, and there's a little locking pin in it. I do have to have the safety engaged to do this. So push in the pin, and then we can unscrew this. This is kind of finicky and difficult to unscrew here. There we go. All right, so end cap comes off, and then we have an interrupted thread like you would not expect. So when I pull this back, if you look at this thread here, that's how it's screwed on. The whole middle half of the threading is actually attached to this separate component, and it's going to come off. So now we have the whole action bar system separate here. We're going to pull this back. So in order to unlock this thing, we have to take this rear catch out, which we're going to do by pulling the barrel shroud forward. A little more. There we go. Sorry, this is a little tricky to do on camera. Pull this guy out, and now we can pull this whole assembly back and off the gun, presto. And then when it comes out, the bolt is also going to come out. So there's our bolt. It's got two big locking lugs. When it's cycling, it's right there in the action, and it's going to lock right here. So there's one locking shoulder, and there's another one on the underside down in there. And you can see the hammer down in there, but I am not going to drop the hammer while the bolt's out because I don't want to try and recock it. So there you go. There is the receiver of the Netsch rifle. Now, the next step in disassembly of this would be to remove the inner barrel shroud and the mainspring here, and we would do that by unscrewing this, which is the spring collar. So once this is unscrewed from the shroud can go off the front. We're not going to do that because this hasn't been disassembled like that in probably 98 years, and we don't need to be the first to do it now. So up here at the front, we have a system of gas rings. You can see them right there at the end. That's what's going to, you don't really need a gas seal, but you need a little bit of a gas seal, because what's happening is when you fire, muzzle blast comes out the end of the barrel about here. It's going to be captured behind this plate. So actually, with suppressors being in more and more common use, probably the easiest way to explain this is essentially this is back pressure like you would get with a suppressor. You've got a lot of volume of gas in here. Yes, there's an open hole and it can get out, but it does also generate forward pressure on this shroud, which this system exploits to operate the gun. Just like that. All right, and I can just barely get this all on frame at once. There is the Samostril Netsch for you, one of the very earliest domestic Czech machine gun designs. It is a very impressive jump from this to, say, the ZB-26 less than 5 years later. I said there was a major trial in March of 1923 for this and its two competitors. Well, Netsch gets to the trial, like he hasn't delivered all of his 25 contracted guns, but he's delivered a bunch of them. They get the first one up for shooting. It goes 23 rounds and then it breaks. Like, so they fix it at the trial, but that's really it. The testing committee has really lost confidence in this design, which I'm not surprised. First off, it's a pretty quirky, janky sort of system. But secondly, his two competitors were both very well-established gun designers. Hotchkiss was selling guns left and right, had a lot of successful designs. Krnka hadn't been quite so successful commercially, but had vast experience in firearms design. Netsch was essentially an independent inventor. So he was working with Czechoslovakia as a factory in Strakonice, but he didn't have the depth of experience that would have been required to be successful really at a competition like this. So at the end of March 1923, his gun is formally rejected from the trial. Now at that point, he still hasn't delivered all the guns he was contracted for, and he does finish them up. It's a couple months later when he delivers the last of those 25 rifles, because presumably he had a contract for those 25, and he had to recognize that he probably wasn't going to sell any more, and he was definitely going to deliver on the contract to make sure that he got paid for it. So All 25 of his rifles were taken into inventory by the Czech military, and in fact, most of them are still in the inventory of the VHU today. He did also make 2 machine gun versions. The military was interested in this system potentially as a full-on light machine gun as well. So there's a lot less documentation on those, but 2 of those were also made. So that is the Netsch system, a really cool, really quite different forward operating system. I'd like to give a really big thanks to the VHU for giving me access to this one to film and show to you guys. If you find yourself in Prague, if you're planning to vacation here or just happen to be watching this from Prague, definitely head over to the Army Museum here. It's part of the VHU complex, and it has quite an extensive and impressive set of displays, including a bunch of cool prototype Czech arms. So check that out. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.